an ideal anything, an ideal piece of art, an ideal family, ideal human being, and certainly an ideal leader would be one where outer excellence and outer beauty is actually emanating from inner excellence and inner beauty.
Hitendra, how are you?
It's great to see you, Mike. Yeah, I'm good.
I've been looking forward to this for a long time. The way you show up in the world, the way that you've pulled on the threads of living the good life, the spiritual life, the ambitious life, the leadership life, like the way that you have straddled what seems to be a very elusive point of view, let alone an elusive practice of being, has been materially important to me in my life. And so I've been really looking forward to this with you.
Yeah. You know, it's one thing to just be like aspiring for this and thinking about it and trying to like codify it for the world. And it's another thing to be really exuding it, right, in your own energy and aura. And that's what I most remember being struck by, about you, Mike, like when we first met, had that very precious dinner that we were part of, which was like, I was just observing, like, wow, you're actually obviously be a teacher of this stuff, but you're actually living this stuff right there in that sort of, very hyperactive environment that we were in. So anyway, so I too have been much looking forward to this.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So maybe that's a place that we start is your new book you've just written about living and leading, and you've crosswalked those two concepts in what feels to me like a bit of an opus of a book. And so congratulations on
thank you.
Being able to get your arms around those two concepts in a rich way. But I was wondering if we could start with, I can't remember if it was a text or an email you sent me about, it was a group chat, but about a recent dilemma that you had in your life. And if you could just open that up, it was a dinner based.
Yeah.
Could you open that up? And I think it would just give us a nice way to think about who you are, the struggles you have, and kind of your outlook.
Well, it relates to a moment that otherwise is very special and indulgent for me, which is when I'm in London every now and then. I mean, look, I enjoy good company and I enjoy sort of, feasting and engaging, socially with others. But I also really enjoy little quiet moments of savoring and enjoying, and this happened to be one of those moments. I had a very busy day with lots of activity and meetings and things. And so I thought of treating myself by going to one of my favorite, very simple, humble Sri Lankan restaurant called Hoppers, in Marylebone. And so I'm sitting there, and at some point the server comes up and he says, "It's time for a last call. If any of you need more hoppers." So a hopper is something which in South India and in Sri Lanka you call it an appam, and it's a very special form of warm, bread, really, really beautiful bread. Goes really well with the spices of Sri Lanka and South India. And so I was planful and I ordered another hopper before the kitchen was going to be closed. And so my hopper came, the second hopper, it's lying there on the side. But then about 15, 20 minutes into that warning moment where they told us the kitchen was closing, there was a couple sitting next to me, earnestly in discussion. And the gentleman, he sort of calls the server and asks him, says, can I get another hopper? And he says, "Sir, I'm sorry, the kitchen is closed." He said, just one hopper. He says, "Sir, I mentioned 20 minutes ago, that was the last call. The kitchen is closed." And he said, "Well, if you can't get me a hopper, could you give me some rice, to go with this food that I have?" And he said, "Sir, I'm sorry, the kitchen is closed." And I was overhearing the conversation and, feeling good about myself that I made sure I ordered my hopper, but then also feeling like, what a silly man. Like, he knew 20 minutes ago the kitchen was closing. This gentleman he could have just been planful about it. All he had to do was just look ahead a little bit and recognize that he had more food there than he had hoppers. And I mean, the place is called Hoppers, you'd want your hopper. And so anyway, a part of me was feeling like, wow, like, he's suffering, but because he just didn't plan his dinner that wisely.
If he was only just a little smarter, a little bit more aware, a little bit something.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
All right,
exactly.
Cool.
So that's my initial reaction, right? And then I'm happily continuing with my meal. And then a part of me just starts to like be in his shoes. And a part of me starts to feel like, but look, Hitendra, I mean, you've done silly things from time to time. That doesn't make you holistically silly. It just means that in that moment you slipped, and I was like, they seem to be having a very, energized, innovating discussion with each other. Who knows? Maybe they were just so deep in some heartfelt discussion that he just didn't pay attention to the closing of the kitchen or something. So don't judge him for that. And so that happened. So that was my first little moments of peacemaking, within
With
myself,
yourself.
within myself, like exactly to your point. And then a part of me was just starting to feel like, oh, wait a second. How can you be sitting here enjoying this meal with the second hopper waiting to be eaten by you? Meanwhile, you know he's hurting for his hopper, so I feel like I should share it with him. And so that little bit of inner battle is going on between a part of me that wants to really indulge with a part of me that wants to also share. And I decide to, to share, I'm going to offer him half my hopper, which sounds just like fair, I'm going to offer him half my hopper. So I look at him and knock on his shoulder a little bit. He looks back and I said, my friend, why don't you, and at that point, as I'm saying, my friend, why don't you, I just don't have the heart to say, have half my hopper.
Because
I don't know, just something from within me just pulls me towards like, Hitendra, just
give.
go for it. Just give, like he's your brother, So I'm like, my friend, why don't you take this hopper? And this
But you really wanted the hopper.
Of course. I mean, hey, listen, Mike, you got to join me in one of those meals there in London, and then you'll know what it means to give up that hopper.
Okay, good.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And so, so then I was just like, why don't you take the hopper? And at that point, see, what's happening is there's this indulgent part of you, this taste-driven part of you, this part that wants to get pampered by the food there. But then there's this other part of you. This other part of you is taking joy in somebody else's joy. And that part of you just starts to override that first part and becomes the dominant energy with which you're experiencing that moment. There's a sense of fulfillment that you're going to get just by having this person really, get to fulfill a need, which, you feel, is very human for them.
So this wasn't about an embarrassment. Like, I don't want to be the one that's sharing, just offering half.
Yeah, no.
This was like, he's suffering, to use your word, from not having his hopper. And I want to give him that joy.
Yes.
So it wasn't, okay, so that's not what I thought it was. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, it wasn't me feeling like, how would it look if I just offer him half? It was, in which case the other half would have been a little bit more grudging something.
Yeah.
It was more like, come on, Hitendra, if you were offering love, offer it with like a full heart, and you'll feel better. And I did feel better in offering the whole, to him, just opening my heart more fully. It's sort of like, you're going to help somebody who's, a friend and they need a place to stay for the night. In India, where I grew up, if you would have a friend come over and you were living in a 1-bedroom apartment, you give your bedroom to that person and you go and, sleep on the couch, and it's just like you're opening the door, and the friend is like God visiting your home, So there's that kind of sense that you get cultivated in you, which my mother had, in me. And so I was doing what I made my mother proud, in that moment, and it made me happy, to do that.
And what did he say when you offered to him?
He says, "Oh no, it's okay, please, you eat it." And then I said, "No, my friend, come on, it's yours, no worries." And he was like, "No, you must. I'm very happy. I'm just happy that you eat it." And so we went back and forth a couple of times, and at that point I realized, like, I think it's okay. I think he's made peace, with his plate of things, and I should just go ahead and respect the fact that he's happy to allow me to kind of keep my hopper.
And then
I eat my hopper, and it's wonderful, and I also feel at peace, with my conscience in that moment and what is happening, and I feel sweetly about him that he was so kind and thoughtful to just allow me back my hopper, and then the meal ends, and they've already left by then, he and his partner, and so I was going up to pay my bill. And I go there and they tell me, "Sir, that couple who was sitting beside you, that gentleman, he already came up and he paid for you." And when he paid for their meal.
It almost sounds too good to be true.
It was like this, there was a moment earlier in the story, like that you had unpacked, with me, where I felt he was the silly one, and I was like the good one here, I was kind of making up for his silliness. And then in that moment when he told me that they already paid for you, and he didn't even come up to me to tell me that he paid for me. right? He just quietly left.
Yeah.
I realized like I was the silly one. Silly in so many ways. Silly first in judging him, but then silly in feeling like, oh, I'm so kind and giving, and all of that, right? Actually, he was the kind one.
That's right. And he did it he was the hand that left the pond without a trace.
Without a trace,
Yeah,
no
right.
Pomp and show or anything.
So I love that story because it recognizes your internal awareness of your dialogue. I call it a standing civil war within myself. I think I borrowed it from T.S. Eliot, but I can't find the quote. So
that's a beautiful quote.
Yeah, at any given
standing civil war.
Yeah, the full quote is, at any given moment in time, I'm a standing civil war within myself. Yeah.
I love it.
You resonate with that as well.
Well, not just resonate with it, but there's an Indian, epic called the Bhagavad Gita, which is a talk given by this, prophet, Krishna to Arjuna, who is preparing himself for a major battle. That battle is called the Mahabharata, or the Great War. And the common understanding of that Great War is as though it was between the good guys and the bad guys in a physical battlefield, which it very well might have been. But at the same time, there's a psychological interpretation of that, which is more about the war within.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much exactly what you're just saying, the war within between the better angels of your nature and, the other sides of you.
I always thought that T.S. Eliot, and again, I can't find the quote, so maybe somebody in our community can help us, but that it was inspired by the Gita.
Yeah.
But that there's a little bit of a jump there.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's the war between two brothers. They were brothers, right?
There were two sides of the family.
Two sides of the family.
And so there were 5 of these brothers on one side and their cousins on the other. Yeah.
And then, but if you take that as not a metaphor, but if you take that as an analogy for the inner war, like it stands.
Yeah, so true.
So you bring up the Gita. What are you resting your philosophy on, your life philosophy?
I have been very drawn to mysticism. And I was very grateful to have been born in a land which has produced a number of them over the centuries, and they have offered and left a lot of signposts of wisdom through scriptural and other means, which is the land of India. And at the same time, I've been equally drawn to mystics from the Kabbalah traditions of Judaism, or, the desert saints of Christianity, or, the Sufis in Islam. And so anytime I find these truth seekers who recognize that there is something much more to the magic of the world than we can see with the naked eye, who feel that there is a divine, loving, ever-present, strong force, creative force that is out there, and that their ultimate potential lies in tuning into and ultimately dissolving in that force, their consciousness into that force. I get just very inspired, by those kinds of quests and people. And sometimes they show up in the guise of, to your point, poets, and sometimes the guise of, musicians, and sometimes in the guise of saints. And to me, even sometimes in the guise of business people who are drawn to, in a very egoless way, seek to expand material and other advancements in the world with a desire to kind of be good and do good without necessarily a lot of material attachments, So anyway, all of these kinds of individuals, quests, scriptures, teachings, mystics has been, like, for me, like the greatest blessed resource, for.
And then let's highlight the 4. Okay, so you said it eloquently, but I want to make sure I get it. Is that you're attracted to these types of folks who are committed to
deepening their attunement with the magic of the universe.
The magic of the universe.
Yes.
Okay. Deepening their attunement to the magic of the universe. How do you explain how the universe is here?
I have to go back to the Zen story, right? About this hungry student who comes over to this, hungry for knowledge, comes over to the Zen master and is inviting him to share and teach him. And the master at some point basically recognizes the student is more restless and impatient than he should be. And so he invites him to sit with him for a cup of tea. And, you know the story, I'm sure. And as the student is looking, the master is keeping on pouring more and more and more tea into the cup. And the cup is brim full now. And it's actually starting to spill over until the student can't contain himself and says, but master, I mean, like, the cup is full. What are you doing? Putting more tea into it. And the master looks at him and says, yeah, you're limited by your own capacity, and how much I can give at one point in time. So from that vantage point, when you ask a question of such profundity in it, right, like, where is this universe from or coming from, or what brings it here, I have to acknowledge that I don't think my cup right now is large enough to be able to fully fathom that mystery of the origins of creation.
I was wondering how you're going to square the empty your cup, koan with that answer. And so the reason I was asking is to see if there's a first principle, deity based or non-deity based, many gods, one God, no God. I was wondering how you were going to use some language. And I'm watching how you worked, and you say, "Wait, let me tell you a Zen koan about being a bit too much." Right. And so, if I were to ask the question just a little differently, which is, what have you learned as a golden thread through some of the mystics?
Yes.
Would that be an interesting way in?
Yeah, absolutely. That is that's something which I can offer a few thoughts on. So, and when I share this, it is as much through the inner kind of inklings and stirrings that I have as it is through the formalization of those in the forms of words, ideas, thoughts that I then have been benefiting from the mystics, right? And so it speaks as much to the intuitive inklings of my soul, as it does to like just an intellectual appreciation of the words on a page, from mystic.
Mm-hmm.
But fundamentally for me, it's like this, as best I can offer, which is that behind everything there is a single universal force, a force that is all loving, that is ever present, that is omnipotent, which is completely strong and able to, do anything, and all knowing, omniscient. And so that all-loving, omniscient, omnipresent, and all-powerful force, we have emerged from it. And just like the only thing that you can get from gold is gold, which I heard from a spiritual teacher, and I like that metaphor a lot. The only thing that you can get from divinity is divinity, And so within each of us and within all of matter and every atom in creation is basically the essence of it is divine. And what happens is that we have, over the course of lifetimes of reincarnation, etc., gain the opportunity to go back to our home, our origin, our native source, which is that divine spark. And by learning to merge with it, we return to that place from where we came. Why that game was conceived, by this divine force, and why was creation put forth out there, etc., with the Big Bang and what have you. That's the part which my cup is too limited now to take in. However, the idea that I'm on that journey and you're on that journey and we're all on that journey to ultimately discover our true self, and that journey might involve multiple lifetimes of classroom experiences in the school of life, is something that I intuitively feel very, just like harmonized with. And then the quest is, what is it that life is trying to invite me in this present moment to do, to open my eyes up, my inner attunement up to more and more and more, just of a sense of understanding about my true nature and about my relationship with the universe. And every experience that I go through is really an invitation to get me closer to that state and to get me to practice that state moment by moment. And once I can get there and I'm fully there, then I become whole. I become enlightened. I become, like a Buddha, or a Jesus, or a Krishna.
So you're taking, that's the essence, that your core philosophy that you've learned,
yes,
and embodied would probably be a more fair way to say it. And then you've also got this other side of you, which is a PhD from MIT. You're a professor at Columbia. You've got an MBA from MIT as well. So there's the study of like excellence across domains and the ambitious, even the ambitiousness of getting degree from MIT, period. But then the study of how to help others in their ambitious efforts that are maybe not spiritually grounded. And so this is the thing that I was wanting to talk to you about most, which is, have you heard of the concept of two selves?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the code switching, like I can be one way when I'm around one group of people that know me this way, and then I code switch to be something different in another way. And there's different groups that are more challenged with code shifting and different upbringings that would support that more than others. And so it feels to me like there's a code switching that's been taking place in business for a long time. Is that they've got their home, spiritual life, family life, and then at work, it's the grinder, hustle, cutthroat, something.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a reason why there's a big stress, because that chasm is fraught, you know, with tension. So how are you thinking about modern leadership?
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like? Let's be wild and say 3 years from now. I mean, let's be absolutely ridiculous and think 3 years out.
Yeah.
You know, like, what would the modern leader look like?
Yeah. I mean, see, I grew up in India, and I have lived most of my adult life in the United States. And I like to say sometimes that, you know, the country I grew up in, I mean, I was very blessed because there's so much inner beauty there, so much inner beauty. And on the outside, it's a little bit of a mess. And
on the outside,
yeah, in India, it's a little bit of a mess at times. And I come to the United States, and there's so much outer beauty here. There's so much outer beauty here, as I observed right when I came. And then on the inside, it's a little bit of a mess.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, and so like for me, an ideal piece of art, an ideal product, an ideal organizational environment, an ideal university, an ideal family, ideal human being, and certainly an ideal leader would be one where you bring both of these parts together. You know, where outer excellence and outer beauty is actually emanating from inner excellence and inner beauty. And I know I'm like, you know, speaking to the master here, you know, because like you're so deeply invested in that work yourself and what you're manifesting, Mike, in everything you do, right? With folks in sports and business and beyond. And so for me, the notion of an excellent leader 3 years, 5 years from now, especially in a world that is becoming incredibly uncertain, fast changing and complex, right, is somebody who has deep commitment and awareness of their inner core, you know, their soul, their spirit within, which you only do if you strive for a certain discipline of, as you know, because you teach this stuff, right? Certain discipline of emotional, you know, mastery, of inner attunement, of calmness, of stillness, of inner connection, of purity and opening of the heart, right? And so they're cultivating these inner practices, you know, that make them always like show up that way. And then when they do, they're also massively engaged in some of the outer craft in the messy milieu of the world, you know, where there will be egos and there will be, you know, moral issues and there will be, you know, at times divisions and there will be unknowns and all that you have to cope with. But they can bring that grace, you know, to that moment and then be guided with a certain level of flexibility and freedom that allows them to transcend their habits, their impulses, their personality, to show up in a way that is most valuable, you know, for that context, to be in service of some noble intention, some noble purpose for themselves and the people around them. And when they do, and they do it consistently over time, it starts to take hold in the people around them as well. Those people, to your point about the two-person kind of piece, they start up showing up differently, right? And so in the case of Mother Teresa, you know, people have reported that when they were around her, they just felt so much more compassion. In the presence of Churchill, you know, during the Second World War, you know, he was invoking something, you know, quite divine in that moment in terms of his capacity to
for war.
Yeah, for leading in a kind of hero journey way, you know, a nation and a world through a very threatening moment, you know, and so people report that like nobody left the presence of Churchill without feeling a little bit braver. You know, in the case of Gandhi, people just felt more calm. In front of, you know, Steve Jobs, they felt more creative, right? So that capacity, these are all capacities of the soul, you know, creativity, calmness, courage, compassion. And so to me, a great leader is somebody who will be tapping into these qualities of their own soul and then showing up in a way that just starts to draw those qualities more out of people around them as well. I don't know. What do you think, Mike? And,
Yeah. I'm like hanging on every word
hmm.
and how you're choosing those words. Okay, so what do I think for
Yeah.
the modern leader?
Yeah, for the modern leader, and yeah.
Yeah, I think when I think about the modern leader is that they understand the applied psychology to help people unlock all the ways that they get bound up. They're not psychologists, but they understand the best principles of the beautiful science of the study of self. Like the science is rich and committed to understanding how to be better. Wherever you are on the spectrum, how do you get a little bit better? Now, the mystics have been teaching the same thing. I'm more interested in anchoring in the tension between the mystics and the science.
Yeah.
Like what's held up for 2,600 years and what's also holding up in the laboratory.
Yeah.
Like I'm interested in those too.
Yeah.
And so quite simply, the modern leader is one that understands for themselves how to be unlocked so that they can be fully present and understands the best practices in psychology to help unlock others.
Yeah.
So this is no longer like bottom line, Wall Street, hitting numbers alone,
Yeah.
grind it out for some other secondary gain later. This is the grand experiment of life happens in the present moment. And we spend most of our waking present moments in a working capacity, working environment. So that to me feels like where the great unlock is going to happen. So it's modern leader. Let's go it from CEO, senior leader, and then there's the leaders in the organization. But let's just start really big for a moment.
Yeah.
They are looking around a couple corners and understanding that people are struggling and suffering more than thriving, more than flourishing. So you can't ask people for more. That's with less.
Yeah.
That maybe for a little bit we could sprint. There's always a little more we can do, but you can't. That's not around looking around three corners. That's like I can only see on horizon one the next 6 months, and I'm doubling down on intensity right now because we've got to get this thing done. But not realizing that if you don't have a team or a community or a group of people that understand how to flourish, you just burn people out.
Yeah.
So we have an human energy crisis. As
Yeah.
one of my colleagues have shared that term with me, a human energy crisis. And the unlock, which you've written eloquently about, the unlock comes from working from the inside out.
Yeah.
It's not needing more external resources.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it's actually not even needing more time. Okay, there's only so much time anyways.
Yeah.
But most people say, oh, if I just had a little more time, if I could just have a little more like alone time, me time, like where I could think and, just kind of, and then we gave, the researchers created that experience to give people alone quality time. And they also gave them an electrical shock. During that period of alone time, people, 67% of men in the study chose to shock themselves instead of just being alone. How about that?
Well, maybe.
We'd rather shock ourselves with an electrical shock, where prior to the what's it called? To the experiment, people got a dose of the shock and they said, oh no, I would never want that. And then given them alone time versus a shock, they chose a shock.
Yeah, yeah.
That's insane.
It reminds me of a couple of things. One is there's a quote from Viktor Frankl. You're aware of the man's search of meaning, right? And so he said we've created a world where people, he says, are unhappier over the weekends when they come back than they are during the week when they're working. And he says then the reason for that is because we have created a world where people have the means to live, but not meaning to live for. And so in those moments of, forced quietude and no activity, it's kind of people are being forced to face themselves. And, if you have something rich and deep and inner life that you've been working on, then I imagine you end up in one place, but otherwise you end up in another place where you're open to taking that shock, right?
Meaning, purpose, and belonging.
Yeah.
Three really rich, big, powerful words. And at work, if you perform well, you can have all three.
Yeah.
You've got meaning.
Yeah.
In your work, you can see it. There's purpose to the organization and you belong.
Yeah.
What happens when you don't perform properly? That's where this thing goes sideways.
Yeah.
It's a performative aspect of life. As long as I can keep it up and perform well, then I've got meaning, purpose, and belonging in my organization.
Yeah.
But it's an invisible handshake that if I don't perform properly over time, I'm not asked to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm on the outside looking in.
Let's explore this performance question a little bit. So you talked about how a lot of people think that if only I had a little bit more time. So I'm very sort of drawn to the science of sort of genius, right? And what does it take for somebody to perform at a level that is vastly beyond what most of us see as, the potential in us, right, to do. And Einstein or, Gandhi in one lifetime being able to incredibly achieve so much and what have you. And so there's a story I want to share with you. So this is John Denver, right? And, my favorite song of his is Annie's song. I don't know if you know that one.
What is it? Can you sing it for me?
Where he sings, so it's like, you fill up my senses.
Oh, you went for it too. Yes, I know the song. Yeah. Oh, you went for it. Do you like singing?
I love that song.
Do you like singing?
In the bathroom.
Yeah, okay. We're on the podcast. Okay, good.
Exactly. So anyway, it's a beautiful song for those who haven't heard it. Anyway, so this song, which is arguably like one of his top hits, what I discovered some time back is that he was having a really difficult time in his relationship with his wife. And so he was in the depths of a certain amount of despair, if you want to call it. And he was on a ski lift going up, to the top of the mountain to ski down. And that's when the whole song came to him. That's when the whole song came to him. Now you think about it. This is a composer-singer. And this is one of his magnum opuses. And how much time did it take for it to come to him, for him to divine this?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And what is the
this
state?
This is what the Buddha talks about, like enlightenment. One of the quotes is, and if I have it wrong, please, I know I'll never hear the end of it, but it's something along the lines of enlightenment can happen over lifetimes or in the next moment.
In the next moment.
So keep paying attention.
Yeah.
The next
so
instant,
beautiful.
right? So keep working.
Yeah.
You don't know when,
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know if I don't have a informed thought about what happens after life. After physical life. I'm not sure I can understand reincarnation. And I certainly, I was brought up in the Catholic faith, and I'm not sure what I want to think about heaven at this point. That concept, it feels a little manipulative in my mind. And I don't want to think that we're just done. So I'm really confused. Okay. So anyways, the Buddha, back to the Buddha, I interjected that because I just wanted to address your position on reincarnation.
Yeah. Look, I mean,
it feels wonderful, but it feels like to me, that and heaven feel a little bit like a story that we're sold as kids.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have another chance.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah. And I think that they're both beautiful. They're both beautiful. Both those ways of seeing it are beautiful, right? And I talk about that a little bit in my book, right? Because I say, look,
you
imagine if somebody who doesn't believe in reincarnation meets somebody who believes in reincarnation. It appears that both of them are completely at loggerheads with each other on some issue in which both of them feel very black and white. But actually, there's so much that each can learn from the other, right? And so for me, as someone who didn't necessarily absorb it from a book as much as just has never felt that I have stopped existing and has intuitively felt that I visited, this planet before, it's so intuitional. The value of seeing a belief, which is that you only live once, is that it makes me take this life more seriously.
Precious.
Because, at one point the light bulb went off in my head because it was actually a monk that I have a lot of, affection for, regard for, and who is heading a certain organization. And I was talking to him and I was saying, brother so-and-so, you're heading this organization. I know this organization has a dispensation, which is like, hundreds of years in the future. So it's so nice that you don't have to face that rush of wanting to like live by quarterly earnings and stuff that, businesses do at times. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, yes, he says, but in this life, in this body, I'm only here now. And I'm only here for a short period of time. So I do feel a great sense of obligation and commitment to want to do my maximum best in this time that I have in this role. And it kind of just woke me up to like, wow, there is actually something really powerful about Mike, like, kind of like a intuition that you have, which is like, this is just one life. I don't know what I want to be open to selling myself about like in the future, but like at the moment, this is just this one life and this is the present moment and that's it. And so personally feel very just appreciative of the need to fuse these opposites.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to sit with you, is because the mystics in leadership,
Yeah.
like the science of excellence and the traditions of insight, if you will, and like bridging those two together. So what do we agree or disagree on what the modern leader looks like?
I think
do we both agree that they're working from the inside out?
Exactly. I think that's the first thing that came to my mind. Is
Yeah,
that
they're
like
working
what
from
we
the inside out.
both agree that it's the inner state that is really their first commitment, to
So for
showing up the
them
right
to
way.
know how to be fully present in you said calm, curious, you had a alliteration of C's.
Yes. So I like to think of it in terms of 5 C's.
Oh, you do? So those were not accidental.
Yeah.
Where did you come up with the 5 C's?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the 5 energies that I talk about in a book. Purpose, wisdom, growth, love, and self-realization. And I just ended up sort of also converting them into a more practical sort of executive language of the 5 C's, which is purpose is like committed to a noble cause.
Okay.
Always in every situation, make sure that you're going in there not with just personal hungers and needs and ego, but commitment to a noble cause.
So we're 100% alignment there. One of the first principles that I work from and I've learned from other folks is to make a fundamental commitment in your life, or a set of fundamental commitments.
Yeah.
And that's what the best athletes in the world do.
Lovely.
They've made a fundamental commitment. Now, it might not be the spiritual or aspirational life that some person wants, but if you look at how they've organized their life, it's a fundamental commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So same with Gandhi, same with Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
Same with all the greats.
So cool.
Fundamental commitment.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. Wonderful. Then the second one to me is to be calm and receptive to truth. As wisdom, and what that means is sometimes if your emotions are out of kilter and or you have, as you write so eloquently in your book, these kind of confirmation biases or mind reading like distortions and all of these things, these are knots in your thought fabric, right? Or, blinders on your belief system that don't allow you to open yourself up to contrarian evidence and creative new possibilities and all of that. And so you stay stuck in the wrong grooves. And so the second, of these 5 C's, the second energy of wisdom is about being receptive to truth, being from a very calm place.
So the way that I square calm and wisdom that you've just done is that I go, so wisdom has some characteristics. It's universally available.
Yeah.
There's a handful of characteristics for wisdom, but wisdom is built on a set of ahas. Call that insight.
Yeah.
And insight rests on being so connected to the truth of something that you go, okay. So if you can get down into the truth of something, you get an insight. If you can cobble together a couple insights, you get to wisdom.
Yeah.
Now then, how do you get to the truth of something? You got to be fully present.
Yeah.
So a calm mind,
yes,
with the right intensity to be here now over time, right? That is part of the ingredients to get to the present moment more often.
Yeah.
And then you go, wait, this is how this flower works.
Yeah.
This is how this relationship goes. This is how my breath works.
Yes.
Right? So then you go, wait, and. So you got insights cobbled up to wisdom.
Yeah.
So I like the calmness of there.
Yeah.
But I would add, not that your model is wrong, but I would add that it's not just calm, mellow, relaxed.
Yes.
There is the required focus and intensity to stay on time with the unfolding present moment. And if we're just calm and mellow, sometimes we can slip down into the non-attentive realm, like the theta brainwaves, as a neuroscientist would recognize. So
it's like a concentrated form of calmness.
That's right. Yeah. But a busy, agitated mind has a hard time being in the present moment enough to get to the truth of something. However, are you familiar with, I'd like to just harden this a little bit, precision questioning?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a tactic that if you are going to present an idea, and this is born out of an engineering model, okay? You're going to present an idea to 5 of us.
Right.
And we want to get to the root cause of where something breaks down. So we're trying at speed to get to the error in your thinking.
Right.
So This is a nice utility here. So you say the sky is blue, and I say, how do you know that? And then I'm going to go down and try to find the error in your logic, right? So just like, what makes you think it's blue? Because I see it, something else. I see a tint of gray. Yeah. And then and then I'm just keep asking questions in the most narrow, precise way that I can to find where the fault in logic is. So precision, my point is, it's a very agitating, irritating, overwhelming state, certainly done in front of other people, that agitates an incredible amount of stress. And you can get to the truth in some respects there. Not maybe the deep wisdom truth that you and I are referring to, but you can find where something breaks. You can find where the argument or the hypothesis falls apart. So how would you square with that idea that the value of an agitated state to get to the truth of something? And I'll square it one more way with you. My wife and I. So I've got Italian, Irish roots. She's got, full Latina roots. And we sometimes will argue. I know that you might find that surprising. the romantic, passionate, Sure. And then when we're arguing, we're not trying to be better or beat each other, but we're just trying to get a point across. Sometimes we strike the right note and sometimes we miss it. But that agitated state sometimes helps to illuminate. Oh, that's what you're saying. Oh my God. Okay. Got it. Oh, my bad. I totally blew that. I missed. Okay. I get you. Okay. So I'm just now making a case for agitation over calmness.
Yeah. So, on the one hand, there is these other energies that I have in my model, right? Of which we've talked about purpose and wisdom so far. To me, purpose is the energy that is about activation, about intention, about, a very sort of engaged part of you in the process of getting to a certain outcome. And so if you apply, in my lens, that energy of purpose to the quest for problem solving, then you get the requisite amount of sort of activating energy that you need to blend and marry.
You're saying it's embedded in there.
Yeah, to blend it with the calmness aspects of the wisdom energy. Now, I do want to say that sometimes we have certain practices that get us to a certain level of, cross-fertilization of ideas and a batting around of certain things. That may not mean that they can't be an even better way of getting there. That may be the best that has allowed us to, flourish so far. But perhaps there could have been a way to get there faster or more clearly.
Meaning if we're both really calm.
More joyfully. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. And I say that smiling as you were describing the dynamics, because I relate to those very much in the context of my own relationship and with my wife. And
is she Indian as well?
Yeah, she's from India.
How do it's a large country. How many people?
1.3. It's the most populous now.
Oh my God, 1.3.
Oh, and that was before, in the present moment. I'm sure they've added a few more.
Oh my God. Yeah, right. So it's too broad to even begin. I know that there's a stat that horrifies me about India and about the United States, which is as many people are in the United States, there are that many people without gas and water and running kind of in India. And do I have that fact right?
I don't know the latest statistics. I do know that there has been tremendous progress since India got its independence in over time, cultivating more economic development even in the more sort of deprived rural areas. The Modi government actually has been quite remarkable. It's one of the lesser celebrated stories in the West, but over the last about 10 odd years, there's been, very substantial investment and development of like electricity and sanitation and water and even digital payments. In fact, India is vastly ahead of the United States.
Yeah, same with Africa.
Micropayments and stuff, and all of that. So
and the infrastructure too, because we're still, the U.S. has still got, poles and wires.
Yeah.
And one of our partners is in Africa and he's like, look, we just kind of leapfrog that. Like
Yeah.
it's all satellite.
Yeah.
Like the infrastructure in that way is far more advanced.
Exactly. So it's happening. And at the same time, there's a different infrastructure, which I also want to sort of highlight, right? And this I'll do through a Steve Jobs story. So he went to India early in his life. He was a truth seeker. He wanted to figure out kind of what life was about. I think he must have been about 17 or so when he went to India. And
it's a cool part of his story, isn't it?
Yeah.
As a young kid, right out of high school or in high school even, and like,
yeah,
there's something else out there that I need to understand.
Yeah, and at some point, I don't know when it was that he said, look, I don't want to die the richest man in the cemetery. That's not the purpose of life. And he said, the purpose of life is enlightenment, whichever, way it means to you. So
what does it mean to you?
Yeah, there's a term in yoga called Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That's how I would define enlightenment. And Nirvikalpa Samadhi is where you are an infinite avenue bliss, connected with every atom in creation and beyond. And you don't even have to sit in stillness to meditate to earn that capacity. You're living in that, in everything, So I don't know. How does that relate to your definition? How would you define it?
Completely tuned.
Completely tuned, yeah.
You are completely tuned with what is.
Yeah.
So
that's beautiful too. That's I think very very consistent with the view that I have of being one with everything.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And if you can do that for like a nanosecond, that's one thing. But if you can do it for a day, that's pretty good. You can do it way more than that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I think about it.
Especially under all kinds of stressors and strains on you, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the Nirvikalpa state. There's another version of it called Sarvikalpa. And Sarvikalpa, you can only do it in very sort of idealized conditions.
On the pillow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
Right, on the mountaintop. Yeah. Okay.
So in that moment, Steve Jobs, he goes to India and then he comes back and he says, coming back to America was a bigger culture shock for me than going to India. He says, because in India, he says, I go around some of these villages and I meet these simple folk. And what I notice is that they do not use their rational, analytical mind as much as we do in the West. But they operate on the basis of their intuition more. And he says, what I've learned is that intuition is a much stronger force than the rational mind. And that has helped shape a lot of my life.
I mean, it's so powerful. And intuition is poo-pooed, certainly in the academic world. It's almost considered, I think it's like from probably Socrates or Plato, I don't know who coined it. Like it's one of the lowest forms of knowledge, right? Of knowing. And so you're a proponent. You're saying intuition is an important form of knowing.
So in my earlier years, I was very drawn to mathematics, and intuition played a big role, for me in helping me.
Intuition and mathematics.
Mathematicians would often talk about sort of getting these eureka moments, right? These sparks, unexpected, that come to you in the shower or wherever, right? And so there's that part. But since I started to meditate more regularly, but like 20 years ago, I have found more and more myself leaning on my intuition to give me depth, clarity, flashes of understanding, new sort of hints or glimpses, which then take more concrete form through the fact gathering and through the analysis and the logical structuring. So you don't sort of like divorce yourself from those, those faculties, those more scientific, bents of your mind, but you also have another resource that is more actively and intentionally nurtured. I don't know. What do you think, Mike? I mean, like in your work, like has intuition been?
Yeah, I was embarrassed by it for a long time. I feel like growing up, I had to have a little bit of a spidey sense on how things worked. And it was a good survival tactic for me. Yeah. And I could fit in really well socially because of that. So I'm tuning. It's what led me to write The First Rule of Mastery, is that I was outsourcing my sense of if I was okay to the eyes of others. If you're nodding your head, then I must be okay. So I was really good at picking up external indicators of safety.
Right.
Okay. So from that lens, I was able to tune what if somebody were watching, I was able to tune really well, but I was lost. I was outsourcing everything and not a grounding force in that tuning fork. So intuition for me for a long time was corrupted from not out of benevolence, but out of survival.
Yeah.
And then it turned into like I was able to read really well, and I got read the environment really well. I got confused if my intuition was my savviness that I had cultivated,
Yeah.
or if it was some deeper knowing that was emerging, and I was able to listen to it. Either way, it was serving me really well. This idea of a gut response, because you took that savviness that I was describing with, paired with my attraction to consequential environments, action sports, extreme sports, as many people might know it, where if you're not tuned in those environments, some unfortunate things can take place. So there's a forcing function out of both of those environments that forced me to work from like, how am I working in this environment? What are the conditions? How am I responding? What are the conditions? And it's this micro checking that would take place. Now I'm into my high school, college years, and I was able to sense things really well. When I was anxious and agitated, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that created such an irritated state for me that I expressed through anger. But when I learned how to calm myself down, and I had the base of those two that I just described, I could listen really well. And then I was hit over the head. So I was feeling like there was an intuition taking place. But then I was hit over the head with professors saying, you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You know, what is this hogwash?
Yeah.
You know, like go back to the 1800s. Like, you know, we're now scientists.
Yeah.
And so I've obviously come full circle to really value intuition. But I don't want it to stop there.
Yeah.
I want to feel something.
Yeah.
And if I'm drunk,
Yeah.
if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm fat in, you know, my nutrition, you know, like I'm being crass here to prove a point.
Yeah.
But if I'm bloated in any way, I can't hear.
Yeah.
And I can't feel what that sensitivity is that is required to have intuition. So then I just rely on reason. And I tend to default on the reason of others and crowdsource it, and then find the chord that makes sense to me. That's when I'm not at my best.
Yeah.
When I'm at my best, intuition is like a little bit of a lightning bulb.
Yeah, beautiful. You know, one of the things that I really like about your approach is the grounding in science. And even now with intuition, you felt obliged in responding to my question by talking to me about, you know, what the scientific sort of support for that is or not is. The good news is that as someone who also has a lot of interest in wanting to build this bridge between, in my case, like spirituality and science, what, you know, you're actually finding now is that in the last few years, there has been a opening up of the scientific community, of the faculty of intuition. Yeah, so there's some really cool, nice research coming out on how intuition is a cultivatable faculty, you know, innate in each of us. And it doesn't in any way, diminish the value and importance of experience, of knowledge, of, you know, effortful analysis of things. But then after gathering that experience and knowledge and effortful analysis, you step back, you know, and when you step back, then either by, you know, allowing yourself to sleep, and then in that state between sleep and awake, like first thing in the morning, I don't know if you've seen some of that kind of research. You keep like a notepad next to you and you just ask yourself, you know, for that problem that you're really trying to work on, what fresh new ideas are coming to you, right?
That's the theta brainwave, the hypnagogic theta brainwaves that I was talking about earlier.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's an amazing little glow that can take place there.
Yeah, I found that to be very valuable, like having that practice first thing in the morning to let the mind go to something, even before you start moving the body
What
around.
are some of the questions that you ask while you're still in bed?
Yeah, no, I mean, so sometimes I'm, you know, grappling with a certain, aspect of leadership, you know, and a model that I'm trying to simplify. And so I'll give you an example. So some years back, we had at my institute and in my teaching at Columbia, gone down the more traditional path of developing a whole curriculum around leadership based on these traditional leadership like behaviors or competencies, like how to have a difficult conversation, how to build trust, how to influence people, how to inspire people, how to give feedback, how to coach, how to this, how to that. And there was a part of me that was just not feeling good, I was feeling it's too complex. And I knew that truth is not complex. Truth is simple.
That's right.
You know, and yet here I was espousing all this complexity and, you know, essentially, you know, making life quite difficult for our students and for the leaders out there.
Yeah, right.
And knowing that, in the moment, they're going to applaud you for, a job well done, a class well taught, they love the workshop, what have you. But I know that I was leaving a lot of complexity in their hands. And fundamentally, 5 years later, 2 years later, even 2 days later, were they able to harness all that complexity to go into those conversations in the workplace in a dog-eat-dog world and actually manifest, all that knowledge and wisdom? No. Fundamentally, I realized that this is learning doing gap, and I wasn't really helping it. So, and then in the meanwhile, I was having this intuitive inklings that there's got to be more pattern, more structure to this than what, meets my eye with all these different toolkits. And so those are the kinds of questions I like to grapple with, first thing in the morning at that time, or, after my meditation or something. And
what is the question though? Like, what would be an example of the question?
Yeah. So the question for me was like, is there a simpler and more attuned to truth way of thinking about how to show up as a leader, right? And so what that led to at some point is a conviction in me that I need to look for the common thread across all of these competencies, all these toolkits. And what I noticed in that common thread is that besides the presence of these 5 energies, there were like simple actions that were getting, small little actions, acts of grace, if you want to call it, which were getting repeatedly used across multiple of those toolkits.
Of those interventions.
Yeah. And so then I went back and I said, let's study the Mandelas, let's study the Lincolns, let's study the Mother Teresas, the Gandhis, and all of that. And what do I see that in them? Do I see the presence of those actions which I was seeing in these tools? And sure enough,
Okay, so what are these great moments of grace that you're talking about?
So the moments of grace would be, for instance, Mandela has a conversation with a general who's threatening to mutiny and to essentially, destroy the prospects of a peaceful transition from apartheid South Africa to democracy, because he's fearing for the future of the white population, and he's just going to usurp, the military power that he has to basically fight against this transition. And Mandela has a conversation with him. And over the course of the conversation, Mandela is able to convince him to basically surrender that sort of claim and that threat and to work in collaboration with him, right? Or another moment, Abraham Lincoln is talking to...
Wait, I missed the insight there.
Yeah, no.
That sounds like a persuasive, charismatic leader.
Yeah. But the actual conversation he had, what he spoke to that general in that moment, if you take those words that he had there and you actually start to break it down into 6 different actions he used.
I see what you did.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
He used 6 different actions. For instance, the general said that we will defeat you because we are trained, we have the military, we have all the armaments. And Mandela didn't start by saying, no, we will defeat you. Be scared of me. I'm going to be the president. Mandela started by saying, General, you are right. You're more trained than us. You have more people than us. All right. We will not win against you. So that's what I call disarming. Disarming means you start by finding something to agree with the other person.
Okay.
Then Mandela says, and you will also not win. So we will not win. He said, and you will also not win. Because what will we do? We will retreat back into the jungles, and then we'll file a guerrilla war with you. And then the whole international community will be with us, not with you. So it'll be actually a pretty miserable outcome for you too. And he says, General, in this kind of war, nobody can win. Right? And he says, now, what would you want for your people? What would you want for your people? So that second action that he says, when you can't win and we can't win, that's fusing opposites, which is like, you have your truth and I have my truth, and both are correct.
Okay.
And then the third one, he says,
fuse
opposites. And then he says, General, what would you like for your people? Given that this is the miserable outcome if we go down this path, and this is the other path I'm offering, what would you want for your people? And in that, he is offering him the choice, which is, I'm not going to make the decision for you. I'm not going to impose a certain argument on you. Ultimately, I respect the fact that it is, you as a leader, you have to choose. And let me just ask you, based on the conditions I've just described, what is right for you, etc. So there were about 2 or 3 other such small little acts of grace there. And what I found is that this is what Mother Teresa would use. This is what Abraham Lincoln would use. This is what at times Steve Jobs would use in their breakthrough moments, moments where they got unexpected outcomes in situations.
So to have difficult, hard conversations, you've studied the greats and found some common themes amongst them.
It could be conversations, it could be epic presentations or speeches they had to give at a time when, everybody was kind of in an emotional tizzy, or at times just a moment of inspiration and warmth and connection that they unexpectedly were able to build with somebody. But there was nothing difficult about it, but the other person walked out feeling really tall, from that interaction, right? And so across all of them, I found a common base of these actions, which is what I've recently published in an article in Harvard Business Review. And coming back to the intuition topic,
Are these six threads in the HBR article that we could link to?
Yeah. So there
Great.
are these 25 actions that I talk about there across these 5 energies, which
we didn't finish the 5 energies yet. We got to 2 of them. Yeah. Okay, so good. So we'll link to the HBR article for some super applied practices. Okay, great. Do you want to go back to the 5 energies?
Yeah.
So we've got
Purpose,
wisdom,
which is calmness and receptivity to truth.
Yep.
And the proposal I was having there is that if you think about intuition as the ultimate faculty there, that's when calmness can really help. Because, as you know, and I know, intuition is not something you can tap in your most kind of, restless moments.
Yes. Okay, good.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Then we
the
go to
third
growth.
one is growth.
Mm-hmm.
And growth is the idea that, we have to stay ever curious. You might be the world's greatest genius at this or that, but the world is ever shifting and changing around you. And it has so much nuance. And the same person is not the same person the next day. So every one of us is evolving, changing, shifting. And so there's, on the one hand, simplicity on the inside, but almost like a need to fathom and navigate infinite complexity on the outside. And growth is an energy that keeps you humble, but also keeps you hopeful that I can fall, I can stumble, but I can always keep evolving. My relationship with you, my capacity to influence this team, my ability to be able to inspire this group, any or all of that are things that, and we collectively as well, as a team, as an organization, as a society, as a nation, like America needs a little bit of that growth energy right now, that
100%.
Regardless of where we are, we can evolve and grow and become a more better version of ourselves. So that's the growth energy.
One of my most endeared applied scientist practitioner, Per Lundstrom, I hope he's listening. Per and I, our relationship, he's at USA skiing right now.
Okay.
USSA, skiing and snowboarding. And he's such a great applied practitioner of science. Every conversation we have, says, "Oh, yeah, that's a good question, Mike. Boy, I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to talk about it with you right now, though." It's just like, it's super like, let's keep going on that. I'll say, "Hey, how do you help an athlete get on edge so that they can turn more dynamically or with more power, or whatever?" And he goes, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that." And this is what he does all day long. Right? Yeah.
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah,
and so
that's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's like, the more, what's Kruger-Dunning effect? Are you familiar with that principle? Like, the people that present as if they know, they actually know very little. And the ones that are really curious about, like, even the most simple things are the ones that actually know a lot.
Right.
The Kruger-Dunning. So how have you found to help people? Because in idea, growth sounds great. Purpose sounds wonderful. Wisdom sounds awesome. Growth sounds amazing. What gets in the way of these? Let's just start with growth. What gets in the way of people having a progressive approach to getting better, or to learning, or to growing?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One can be exactly what you just said, which is like a knower kind of mindset.
Knower.
Right?
Yeah.
You feel more confident that perhaps you should, or you feel more impatient, about wanting to just quickly assert a conviction and move on, rather than open yourself up for deeper discovery, and
okay, that tension is the tension between the mystics and the business folk, right? Is the mystics can hang there for a long time, and the research scientists can actually hang there for a long time, unless they have the demands of publication or something, right?
Yeah.
And then the folks in the business world, and athletics included, it's like we've got the divide between these two is so clear in this point.
Yeah.
Like, hey, listen, we got a shot clock here. We got to go.
Yeah.
We've got to make a move.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like, let's talk about it, but we only got like 3 minutes. Let's go.
Yeah.
So how do you square that tension that sometimes there is a real need to measure once, cut once, even though we'd like to measure twice?
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of a story of Steve Jobs. So he's wanting to launch a retail outlet, business for Apple, right? This is before Apple Stores was launched. So he brings in this guy, Ron Johnson from Target. He'd done some good work at Target, was kind of a legend in the retail world at that time. And Ron Johnson shares the story. He says, like, I stepped into the car, Steve had come to pick me up, and we were just about to announce the launch of, the retail store format. And we were going to this airport hangar where the people had laid out the store in the way that we thought it should be laid out. And we were going to just simulate kind of what that experience is like for people coming to the store. And he said, I had this new idea that just flashed in my mind, which I was convinced was the right idea. So I get into the car with Steve and I say, Steve, we've been thinking about organizing the layout of the store based on product. Actually, we should do it on the basis of the user experience. So we should have something about movie making, something about music, something about this. And he says, Steve just sort of boomed and said, Ron, this is so much at the last minute. We are going to the hangar to see the store. We've invested so much in this. This is just pre-launch. You're not going to bring that up now, okay? This is done, at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he says the rest of the 10 minutes in the car were quiet. I didn't speak. He didn't speak. We enter the hangar. People are there. And he says he goes up to the podium and Steve looks at them all and he says, Ron here thinks that the way you guys and we laid the store out is completely wrong. And he's right. So I want you to listen to him now. And I'm just going to go back to my office. So he said he left me there with them. And he said, later the day I went over to his office and talked to him. I was like, what happened? And he looked at me and said, I was thinking about it after you said that and I reacted. And I realized that actually at Pixar Animation, right, which is another company that he owned, right, I had always valued that principle that they have there, that until a movie is released, if there is a better idea, we should implement it. We should implement it. And he said, that's always been something I have prided myself over, our capacity to always keep, embracing new innovation. And he said, so I changed my mind about that. And I wanted to offer that up in the context of what you just said, because, I consider the first part of like his reaction when he boomed and just shut him down to be Steve Jobs 1.0,
It's like Hopper 1.0.
You're
right, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, that was like you and for the Hopper. Yeah.
Wow,
right.
That's cool. That's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Mike. And then there's Steve Jobs 2.0, right?
That's right.
2.0. And there are people like Ed Catmull, the CEO of Pixar Animation Studio, who've said like, look, the Steve Jobs that I knew over the course of 20 years, he was very different from the one that I first encountered. He kept evolving and changing, and he learned his lessons from some of the things he didn't do well in Apple 1.0, right? And so if you take that idea, then there's hope for all of us. It's something I've been experimenting with, and I've been finding really great outcomes with my executive MBA students at Columbia, with some of our clients at Mentora, where basically, and I think this is going to be something very resonant with you because of your work, right? And please react to this, therefore, which is that when we invite executives to take pause for 10 minutes before critical events that are coming up, there's a presentation they have to do to the board, they have to walk into this conversation and lay off a couple of, 100 people, or they have to do this, or they have to do that. When we invite these executives to basically take 10 minutes and give them a structured sort of guidance as to what to do with those 10 minutes to check their emotional state, put them into the state of calmness and receptivity and openness to the experience they're going to have to go through, which might be otherwise uncomfortable for them and feel like, why me? Why do I have to do this? No. Open yourself up to that. Take it from a space of like open possibilities as to what it might unfold. And then maybe be planful a little bit about a couple of these energies and actions, the human part of the equation, as opposed to purely the PowerPoint, presentation and or the Excel spreadsheets that you needed for it. No, just the human part of the equation. It's amazing. They go in there and they act much more as the 2.0 version of themselves than the 1.0 version.
So let me run a quick little experiment with you. Is that, but before I ask the experimental question, is that research-based, or is that something you've been observing from like your lab and your experience? Or is there actually research that's resting on that?
So there is two forms of research that are behind this. So the first is the science that is out there, which you tap into just as much as me, of emotional mastery, of how when your emotions are at a calmer place, you are much more likely to be zooming out and seeing things in a bigger picture way versus zooming in and only seeing it for the things that is causing you anxiety or anger, right? And or the science of intentionality, right? If you have a situation that you're approaching from a negative mindset and you just assume that you're going to fail or that this person is going to act this way, you just limit yourself from going in there and behaving with facial expressions, tone of voice, words, etc., that might draw out the better version of that person and all that, right? And so intention really matters. So that's one part of the science, which is a pretty rich body of work, right?
100%.
Okay.
I didn't know if there was one study or a series of studies.
It's a mix of things. To me, it's a mix of things all pointing to the value of starting from a place of committed, calm, connected, curious,
Oh,
center,
here we
which
go.
is kind of like the 5C.
We're going to get to it. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing which has been done, if you want to call it in my labs, right, in my Columbia Executive MBA students class, as well as with our executives, through our own pilots and work, we've been able to now quantify over about 500, 600, 800 of these situations, and what we find is that typically people end up excelling at those and what their own standard might be about 20% of the times. When they start applying this method, the very first time they apply it, we saw that number 20 go to about 24%, which is about a 20% boost, 4 upon 20, right? And then by doing it again and again, and within about 10 of these iterations, which is the maximum that we've tracked so far, that 24% becomes 47%.
Come on.
47%. So there's about basically 150% boost in performance.
And that
from
47% or the 20%, the anchoring question was about their experience?
Well, the anchoring question was, think about the high stakes moments, right? What was your goal for that, right? And the goal might be, I need to get buy-in from these stakeholders for this budget, or I need to get this person
so
to
was it even
accept
an
my
external
feedback.
goal? It wasn't an internal?
No, it was an external goal, right? To do with
even more complicated.
A certain outcome that they're looking for, right? And then on a 1 to 5 scale, did you completely meet that goal, which would be a 5? Mostly is a 4 and all that, right? And so this 20% I mentioned was a 5 on 5. And so the 5 on 5 rating goes from 20% to 47% of the times.
That's interesting that you chose to do an outcome that is out of their control as opposed to an outcome that is 100% under their control.
Yeah.
Which is like so it's like a from to. If I do this, I'll move from an agitated state to a calm state. And I know if I'm calm, connected, filling your C's, that I will bring my best into that environment.
Yes.
Then if, let's say, because when people are the opposite of the 5 C's and they're anxious and irritated and agitated and tunnel vision and self-referencing as opposed to purpose referencing, that it would be an easy narrative to say when you're in that state, you're most likely not going to convey people that your idea is spot on. So you went to external.
I'll tell you why and how, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, as you can imagine, the arena that we play in, people are ultimately also keen to get better, external outcomes, right?
Yeah.
They do want that. So that's one part.
Yeah.
But here's the other part, right? And so you have been very actively tapping certain fields of psychotherapy. You mentioned that in your book.
Right.
You're now talking about cognitive behavior therapy, for example, as one of those. So I had the privilege of working very closely with one of the preeminent exponents of that discipline, Dr. David Burns, from Stanford University, right? Feeling Good, the new mood therapy and beyond. So he and I partnered over time, and I said, look, David, you focus on minimizing pain, and I want to take your beautiful work and I want to use it to help people maximize gain. Because that's another community of people just hungry out there in the world. And so in porting those tools over to that world, which again is not alien to you because you're doing it so beautifully yourself. One thing I learned from him is the power of the micro over the macro. Right. So the macro would be, I want to succeed in my career. I want to be the greatest leader in the world. I really want to be able to transform this organization. The micro is, how are you showing up in your moments of truth? When this person walks into your office, how are you showing up for that person? When you actually have to do that presentation, when there's this terrible conflict going on in the world, how do you show up in that moment, right? So in these micro moments. And what I noticed in David is that what he was really emphasizing is that if people can master these micro moments, you just create the condition where the whole fabric of your leadership and your organizational journey and all that starts to become a lot more illuminated.
It's worth repeating what you just said. That is worth repeating. That mastery of micro moments really rests on your ability to be aware and present of what's happening. And that's micro moments are resting on micro decisions.
Yeah.
It's small little choices that you're making. Am I open or am I agitated? It's small little. And I asked Dr. Woody Holberg, I think he's one of the best of us. And I don't say this lightly. He's just 9 or 10 out of 10 on spiritual awakeness, physical, like whatever, techno. He just got back from the International Space Station. So he's an astronaut and MIT trained as well. The brightest and the best of the best. And so I said, what does it mean to be your best?
Yeah.
He goes, huh? He goes, I don't know. It's just like throughout my day, I'm making all these really small choices, and the small choices I'm making, in every little second is like, I'm just trying to choose those moments to be my very best. It's like, it comes down to my little micro choices.
Yeah.
Like, oh my, it's so
That's
simple.
amazing.
It's
That's
just so
amazing.
simple right there.
Yeah.
But you can't do it if you're not aware.
Yeah.
You can't do it if you don't have first principles.
Yeah.
And you really can't do it if you're somebody that would say, I had a bad day.
Mm.
What? Your whole day was bad?
Yeah.
Do you mean you had a bad moment and you couldn't recover?
Mm.
Do you mean you had a moment that challenged you to your essence and you didn't know how to respond? Is that what you mean? So like, can you imagine having a bad day?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, okay. So fun, because if people, back to your original point, if people are to do something for 10 minutes prior to a perceived
high stakes moment or
right.
emotionally charged moment or something.
And
right?
in those 10 moments, you're having them down regulate and become more open to what were you doing in those 10 minutes?
Yeah, in those 10 minutes, which actually is another thing I talk a fair amount in the HBR article for those who want to get a deeper dive. But essentially, step one is set a goal for that. Not just a business goal, but like a humanistic outcome that you want. Like, I want to build more trust with this person. I want them to be able to walk out after I've delivered the sensitive news, but in a way that makes them feel cared for and makes them feel honored, even though it was a little bit materially, of a loss for them, whatever it is that I just had to kind of speak to them about them getting a lower bonus, them not getting the promotion, us not doing the deal with them, whatever it might be.
Kind of what Nelson Mandela did.
Yeah, exactly. Right. In that moment. Or I want them to be inspired and motivated so that I leave, but they still keep going on this quest in a way that is really important, despite the challenges in the industry. So you set a goal. That's number one. Then number two is that you check in on your emotional state and just make sure that you are not feeling consumed by certain constrictive, negative, victimizing type of limiting emotions, right? Like I feel like, oh, this person never gets it. Finance will never talk to marketing. I have no power in this room. Why am I doing this anyway? I'm just going through the motions because I have to. No. You got to put that clutter aside and you got to be able to walk in there and say, you know what? There's always possibilities in this. At the minimum, I'll have a deeper understanding of this person. We'll be able to start taking the first few steps towards a little bit more trust. I'm hopeful that we'll get to this outcome that I want, but I know it's been a little bit tricky or difficult to get these two parties together. And at the minimum, I'll experiment with some new behaviors. And you never know. This is the way it's been repeatedly the last 3 times, but with this new behavior, who knows what's possible, right? And so this is the opportunity that life is presenting to me in this. So how can you create a positive intention for this?
Okay.
And then you start to play around with some of these energies and actions to say, okay, there needs to be a little bit more human connection here. So let me use these 2 actions from the love energy, like, appreciate or affiliate, because I think that will be really valuable to create a sense of warmth in a room where trust is a little bit broken.
So in this third part, would you have them pull from the 5 energy sources? And I know we've only done 3, wisdom, purpose, and growth.
Growth, yeah. And the 4th and 5th one are love and self-realization. And so, so there's this, library of these Lego blocks, these actions.
Yeah, I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you basically, I would ask people to pick 3. And now we actually have a method and a tool through which we
pick
are
3 of the 5.
3 out of the 25 actions.
Oh, 25 actions.
Yeah.
Oh, so you get
so as an example, you take the energy of wisdom, right, which is about truth seeking. One of those actions was disarm, right? Disarm says,
oh, I see what you did. So you've got 5 core capability, 5 core, what do you call them? Energies. Yep. And then from each 5, you've got 5.
Yeah, roughly speaking, 5 per. In one case, there's 6, in one case, there's 4.
Oh, so you had to go.
Yeah.
It's all perfect. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the nature of the world.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And okay, so then you have them pick 3 of those 5.
3 out of the 25
out of the 25 actions. Oh, that's really cool.
And the reason for that is because, look, I mean, ideally, I'd want you to have all 25 of them in your arsenal, and you'll get there over time. And at some level, these actions are already part of who you are. But with the vantage point of trying to make you grow and up your game and strive to get a certain kind of early breakthrough, the atomic habits kind of idea, right? Which is, I mean, you were talking to me about it, just earlier, right? About your moment in San Diego, where you did that sort of early in your career with 120 athletes.
What did I do?
Where was that? And getting to help them spend 5 minutes.
No, that was Late Night Sports. It was in LA.
In LA.
And it was a nonprofit that I started that brought young high school and college age athletes together on Saturday night. And the only price to admission was you had to listen to me for 4 minutes, And so it's taking this big field of science, of psychology, applied sports psychology, if you will, and getting it down to 4 minutes, and then something they can practice that night. So in some respects,
that's kind of like an action,
it's
like a middle micro something, right?
Yeah, but it's almost the same process, which is like before you go do the thing, do this thing.
Yeah.
And do you teach them about mental imagery? Because it sounds like what you're doing is some of the, what would be a best practice in sports psychology, which is imagining your future state.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you do that in sports psychology, are you inviting them to imagine like being, on the pedestal receiving the gold medal and the crowd applauding, or do you also invite them to imagine the process of getting there, like a play in the game, or like what somebody would do and what they would do? Because I call it visualization, but that's kind of more the state of play and the, all of that.
I don't use visualization anymore because I want to invoke a word that embodies all 5 senses.
Okay.
And imagination does more than visual.
Yeah.
So I use imagery out of imagination.
Okay.
And
I
do an 85-15. 85% of the time, it's seeing themselves kicking ass.
I see.
Okay, like being their very best.
Yeah.
And slowing it down, speeding it up, seeing it from different directions. There's 5 steps I walk through, and there's some creativity in there.
Yeah.
15% of the time, I have them seeing themselves in a very compromised situation.
I see.
And working through that.
Mm-hmm.
Slowing it down.
Yeah.
Seeing it from different perspectives.
Yeah.
But working through if you and I were cage fighters.
Yeah.
Okay. Like put yourself in a end game choke out position.
Right.
Where they have your back and they've got their arms and legs wrapped around you.
Yeah.
And they're choking you out. Like that's a compromised situation now.
Yeah.
How do you navigate yourself from that point of view?
Yeah.
And so 85-15, 85 success, 15 compromise. And then almost like a throwaway, if you want, at the end, see yourself with your fist raised. Mm-hmm. See yourself with the belt around. But that's like a nanosecond.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And then there's always a last moment, which is see yourself walking. There's usually quiet moments. See yourself walking by yourself from, let's say, the arena to the bus, or from the arena to your car.
Okay.
Like that moment, how do you want to feel in that moment?
Right.
So there's an interesting directionality in that. But the essence of the science is using all 5 of your senses to feel, see, hear, smell, taste, see how you'd like to be in the next, in a state that you haven't, or an experience that you haven't been in.
Yeah.
And there's a real science to that. It takes time. That's a skill.
Yeah.
So there's a practice there.
Yeah.
And if you're only doing the visual part, you're missing you're missing the bulk of your imagination. And we all know the power of imagination. So
yes.
So anyways.
Yeah, no, thank you. I have seen visualization as ultimately the exercise of all those 5 imagination, senses, but I've stayed with the word, and I really like your mindfulness in saying like you listen, but that word kind of limits people. And often you have to qualify and explain to them that you don't just mean that you have to have visual images. And some people are not good with the visual side, but they're good with the feeling, of being in that, and the emotions.
I think the feeling is more important as a bellwether or as a North Star than the seeing of the image.
Yeah.
And let's be really clear. Let's put this idea to rest. At least I will. Maybe you're going to not allow me to do so eloquently here, is that if you see it, it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? That mystical idea that, like, if you imagine the red Porsche in your driveway, it's going to happen. Like, no.
Yeah.
You got to put some work in, Yeah. But there is nothing wrong with like spending time seeing that if you want to.
Yeah.
That's cool. But you got to do some work.
Well, that's the view with which I was asking the question that I also come into this conversation with, is like, to my knowledge and understanding and experience, it's much more valuable to be imagining like that state of play, that flow, the state you bring into it, and perhaps a couple of scenarios and situations in which you want to make sure that you can visualize how let's call it imagine, that you will be holding that space for grace, from you. So I really enjoyed like learning and understanding your 85-15% rule, and
it's
just that
general.
like 0.5% or 1% that you focus on that. And
Yeah.
but then also this thing about walking, to
moment
your
after.
car. Like I love that. Like, what got you to think about that as being
Well,
a valuable thing to do?
it was my grandfather. And by the way, the 85-15 is not research based. That's something I've done for years, and it feels like I'm honoring the experience and not just being naive that 100% of the time see success. Like it's just not how it works, right? I want to feel myself in compromised situations and have repetitions and almost like a free pass at sorting it out rather than only being able to sort it out in the moment. So, so that 85-15 just feels like it's honoring, the complexity of experience.
Yeah.
So the quiet moment, you've heard this phrase, like when you look in the mirror, when you shave and you look in the mirror, only you really know who you are, Mike. This is my grandfather's wisdom. That generation, it was a World War II generation. And he says, so that's me honoring that in whatever the quiet moment is at the end, if you really brought yourself, if you were looking for relief versus the creative love affair with the unknown. If you were just trying to get out of it, or if you were so tight and tense that you couldn't access your creativity required for being on time with a moment that you've never been in before. So, if you had a love affair with it or you got lucky, if you were honest with your preparation, or you were more interested in not looking bad than really applying your very best. Because to apply your very best means that you're right on an edge. You don't know how it's going to go. And that's a very scary place. Most people are looking for relief from the anxiety of not knowing how something's going to go. And most people are agitated and anxious going in. And that's why relief is kind of one of the mechanisms that people I just want to get it done. Why do I do this to myself? Like, I just need to get it done. Like I signed up for this thing, and like, what you're really looking for is relief because you don't love the not knowing how something's going to go. And I understand that because being out of control is hard. And some people have real trauma around that. Like real trauma. And so we're all just trying to figure it out. And we're all just trying to do our very best here.
Let me ask you this. So in that method, we have emphasized and focused on the the prep part. Do you also bring this inner life aspect to focus in some of the after action review kind of like piece that happens?
We call it hot wash.
Hot wash.
Yeah, so we do a hot wash. Every meeting here at Finding Mastery, even after you and I do this podcast, we'll have my team will have a hot wash. This is born out of one of my Navy SEAL friends who, this was a best practice. Before you take care of a shower, which is taking care of yourself, you take care of your gear, your equipment. Before you take care of your gear, you take care of the team and the mission. And so the hot wash is literally your dirt. You're dirty from the intensity of the environment. And it's a quick rinse of what just happened. And it's two questions. What went well? What do we want to work on? And if you can get one applied statement out of it, it's cool. But it's a moment to honor the mission and the team before you take care of your equipment, before you take care of yourself. Which is nice. So it's a hot wash. It's a quick, dirty little like, what just happened? And we structure it. What went well? What do we want to work on? And any athlete that is listening to this right now that I've spent time with, they would say, oh, wait. We do that after every practice, Mike. That's what we do, right? And we do that after every game. Tell him, Mike. Tell him. So after every practice, we treat practices and games as the same for the most part. And so after every practice, what went well? What do you want to work on? After the game, what went well? What do you want to work on? So it's a hot wash either with yourself or or some other folks that are on the team.
Very good. Very good. I mean,
it's simple. It's like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's no real pleasantries in it. It's, you don't have to do the sandwich approach. Here's something, it's like, hey, bang, 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 bang.
Yeah, this capacity to have us just stop being in a state of judgment about good versus bad, but instead just
I like that.
sit on neutral embrace of the truth, right? In whichever way it's coming to you.
Yeah, that's right. Even when I said earlier, a bad day, I even bristled that I said it because like there's so much judgment in
Yeah.
bad day, good day.
Yeah.
But the idea that somebody is going to frame their entire day as bad, as a double negative,
Now, let me bring it back to where we started from, right? The mystics in my case, right? If there is truly an all-loving force out there, and that force is all-knowing and is actually all-powerful, then how can you ever have a bad day? Because that force loves you, and whatever the force is giving to you, bequeathing to you for that day, has to be coming from some illuminated place. Now, you may not have the full illumination yet in the present moment to know why or what or how. So engaging in some amount of sense-making or meaning-making all the time as to like, what could be the message here? Or what am I meant to manifest in this moment, or how am I meant to grow from this, or whatever, that can be a conversation that you can always be having with yourself, but you never, ever allow yourself to judge anything as being bad for you, in that context. And I'll give you a little story just to kind of illustrate how I've, like, from time to time been reminded of that lesson, been reminded when I fall, from grace, from these standards. So I was in an airplane, actually, coincidentally, coming to LA. I was in New York, and the plane just sat in tarmac for a long time, and, we're just waiting. And finally, they make the announcement. This is late in the evening now. It's probably, I don't know, forget 9 p.m. or something. They said, unfortunately, we're going to have to come back to the gate because the FAA has regulations about how long a crew can work. And this crew already has now exceeded. If we fly to LA, we would be exceeding the hours that the crew is allowed to work.
I've been on this announcement before.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, damn it, like,
you did.
I just said something like, oh no, or something. Or maybe I forget.
It's Hitendra 1.0. But we're back here again. Yeah.
Exactly. And this lady next to me, right? She just looks at me with so much grace, and she says, "Everything happens for a reason." And she just smiles and just says, "Everything happens for a reason." Well, I'm looking at her like, "Oh no, like, come on, let's share in a mutual state of grief
suffering.
And suffering."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And she's like, "Everything happens for a reason." Okay.
This is the first trope that you've had. The first kind of like. I was going to comment on it, but it actually didn't come from you. It came from your.
Yeah, exactly.
But you haven't used one. What are they even called? I'm blanking on what it's called. Like, what are those called? Like, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
What are those phrases called?
I don't know, proverbs or cliches. Okay.
You haven't used one cliche yet, and I really appreciate that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I didn't necessarily observe that about my language, but yeah. So one thing I learned from mathematics, my first love really is about going back to first principles. I would never allow myself to just replicate a certain sort of step-by-step approach to solving a certain equation or something just because that was the formula given to you in the book. I never wanted to follow the formula. I wanted to understand like what the underlying logic was and how you can go back to the axioms and therefore do it step by step. So I don't know, maybe that's also something I attempt to and try to do with language, rather than go for some scaffolding, try to go back like, what is,
But probably everything happens for a reason is a first principle for her.
Yeah. And it's okay, so here's how powerful it was for me in that moment. So so we enter back into the terminal. And at this point, the airline is saying, like, we're going to give you, we're going to give you a place to stay here at the airport because, New York is far away from many of you, and we're going to put you in the first flight out in the morning. It turns out there's a long line for the airport queue, and I was like, I think I'm better off just going back home and sleeping at least 5 hours, the amount of time it'll take me to get this hotel from these folks. And so I take the cab, I go back home. And I'm entering my apartment, and I'm feeling a little hungry. So at some point, I'm detecting a strange smell, and I go over to the kitchen, and as I'm wanting to just turn my gas on, I left the gas on.
Come on.
I left the gas on. And the smell I'm getting is of the gas.
Oh my. We don't really know, do we?
Everything happens for a reason. Right? Like, I could judge it to be a horrible day, a horrible moment. Mm-hmm. Maybe I would have come home and the gas would have not been on. Who knows what else might have caused that thing to happen for me? But it was just like, to me, it was the universe talking to me, which is, Hitendra, just in case you thought she was just like saying a cliche, it's real.
What a joy. Your depth, your soul, your research, your clarity, the wisdom, the purpose that's clear, the growth that you've committed to, the self-realization that you work from. I mean, thank you.
Yeah. Michael, I'm only comfortable leaving this space if I get a commitment from you, which is that we got to have another one of these conversations soon. And those are going to be ones where I would love to draw even more out of you. Because I know so much of what you just said is beautiful, and it's just the tip of the iceberg because there's so much I feel like my listeners also can learn from you. So I want to do a little bit more of this at some point
Love
with
it.
you. Yeah.
Hitendra, thank you
Cool,
so
cool.
much.
Thank you too. Very enjoyed to be here.
Awesome.